They called him Khorne, son of Terra, though few knew the truth of it. Born in the blood-slick gutters of Terra's hell-ridden cities, long before the sky was pierced by the Great Crusade, Khorne's life began not with a cry, but with silence. A silence forged by violence. His mother, unknown. His father, forgotten, buried beneath the dust of imperial archives that never truly cared. What remained was a child, ragged, starving, and surrounded by the corpses of those too weak to fight. On Terra, in the old night, survival was a miracle. But for Khorne, survival was instinct. He learned to kill before he learned to read. He scavenged among the carcasses of hive slums, stole from gangers twice his size, and slit throats in alleys shrouded in exhaust fumes and rot. But Khorne was different. Even then, something inside him stirred. A fire, a fury, an unquenchable need to prove himself, not to others, but to something greater. He never spoke of it, not even later among the 8th Legion, but deep down the boy had already heard whispers of something ancient in the blood. His world changed when the Emperor's Thunder Warriors came, towering giants clad in bronze, their purpose brutal and absolute, to unify Terra under the banner of the Master of Mankind. Their war was merciless, cities burned, millions died. But Khorne, the gutter child, stood among the ruins and watched them with awe, unflinching. He saw not conquerors, but gods, and one of those gods saw him in return. The custodians found him first, slicing down feral mutants in the sprawl of the Pan-Pacific wastes. They expected another corpse. Instead, they found a boy who did not yield, who would not fall. A boy who smiled through broken teeth, drenched in the blood of men thrice his size. A file was opened, a name recorded, Khârn, one of the few selected for the great gene forging to come. When Angron, the Red Angel, was found on Nuceria, the Emperor needed sons who could endure him. And so Khârn was chosen, not for purity, not for nobility, but for resilience, for rage. The implantation of the 12th Legion's gene seed nearly killed him. Most did not survive the butcher's nails, the cortical implants that fed upon emotion, fueling strength through agony. But Khârn endured. Again, not by will, but because it felt right. The pain did not break him. It completed him. The World Eaters welcomed him as one of their own. He was among the first Terran-born to earn distinction, and perhaps the only one ever truly embraced by Angron. Though they were not of the same blood, the bond between them was primal, two broken souls carved from the same fury. Khârn did not fear Angron. He revered him. While others cowered in the wake of their gene father's rages, Khârn stood firm, taking every blow, every scream, every slaughter, learning, absorbing, becoming. He rose swiftly. Where Angron was a storm of wrath, Khârn was its edge, controlled, directed, precise. He served as equerry to the primarch, not by command but by merit. It was Khârn who soothed the madness, Khârn who translated rage into strategy, Khârn who led the charge when others faltered. He was the chain that held the beast, until even chains began to snap. It was during the early Crusade campaigns that Khârn earned his title, the Betrayer. But not in the way history would later claim. Not yet. Among the World Eaters, Betrayer was spoken in admiration. Khârn betrayed weakness. He betrayed hesitation. On the killing fields of Genna, he betrayed an entire army by turning on their cowardly generals, executing them for retreating without permission. His legion did not punish him, they elevated him. He became a symbol, not just of war, but of purpose in war. Yet beneath that purpose, the nails throbbed, ever louder, ever deeper. He felt it during the feasting halls after victories, when laughter turned to brawls and wine turned to blood. He felt it in moments of calm, when his hand twitched for a blade and no enemy stood near. The nails demanded violence, and Khârn, despite all his discipline, began to listen, and then came the whispers. They were not in words, not at first. They were in the rhythm of battle, in the taste of gore, in the thunder of bolter fire. Khorne, the blood god, was not yet known to him, but he was already present, in every scream, in every slaughter. Khârn did not yet speak his name, but he was already kneeling, blade in hand. Still, in those days, there was a sliver of restraint in him, a soldier's honor. He fought for the Emperor, he fought for the Legion, he fought for Angron, and above all, he fought with purpose. But purpose was a fragile thing in the 12th Legion. As the Great Crusade reached its apex, the World Eaters became an instrument of annihilation, first against aliens, then rebels, then their own humanity. The screams of Nuceria would soon echo across the stars, and Khârn, once the iron hand of loyalty, would begin to slip. Not yet, not here, but the ground was already cracking. He still remembered Terra. He still remembered the boy in the gutters, staring up at impossible giants. And perhaps, in his rare moments of clarity, he wondered if that boy had died somewhere along the way, or if he had simply become exactly what he was always meant to be, the savage son of a dying world, and the last hope of a god made from rage. There was no ceremony, no grand declaration or ritualized honor. When Khârn took his place among the chain-scarred ranks of the World Eaters, it was not to applause but to violence. Every day aboard the Conqueror, the flagship of the 12th Legion, was a contest in blood. There were no laurels here, only blades, bruises, and broken teeth. And Khârn, he thrived in it. It was not that he enjoyed the pain, though it came with every brawl, nor was it glory that drove him. It was something deeper, something elemental, an unrelenting need to test himself against every standard of strength, every boundary of wrath. To climb not by stepping over others, but by burying them. The 12th Legion had no patience for weakness. The butcher's nails ensured that. Their cortical implants punished hesitation, rewarded fury. The nails roared like a storm when rage built, and screamed with agony when it subsided. And within this choir of engineered madness, Khârn stood apart, not immune, but dominant. He bent the fury to his will. Captain soon became a meaningless title. What mattered was the chain of kills, the trails of crushed skulls and burnt-out citadels. On the world of Arigata, Khârn led the charge against the Xenos resistance who clung to subterranean vault cities. He did not break their lines with siege weapons, but with sheer terror, leading squads that fought naked-chested and roaring, his axe caked in ash and brain matter, his eyes two coals of burning devotion. Even the Legion's apothecaries, cold, numb observers to butchery, whispered of Khârn's battlefield focus. He killed not for pleasure, nor even for release. He killed with purpose, each strike measured like a ritual. When others raged like beasts, Khârn was surgical, a weapon honed by fury, not consumed by it. It was around this time that his name began to echo beyond his own legion. At the siege of Carthage, where a rebel war master had fortified himself behind a kilometer-thick plasma shield, it was Khârn who devised the assault, not with siegecraft, but slaughter. He had learned that the shield's power source was psychically linked to the defender's morale. By creating a massacre so horrific, so utterly demoralizing, the shield would collapse under the psychic backlash of despair. And it did. In less than 20 minutes, the outer city had been turned into a field of severed limbs and screaming priests. The shield flickered, failed, and Khârn was already inside, drenched in the blood of the last defenders before the rest of the World Eaters breached the walls. But not all who watched him fought beside him. Some feared him. Some even hated him. In the warrior lodges, secretive circles that had begun spreading among the legions, whispers crawled like parasites. that Khârn was too loyal to the Imperium, that he did not yet see the chains binding the legions to the Emperor, that when the time came, he might stand in the wrong line. He heard these whispers, and he did not care. He was not blind. He knew the cracks forming within the Imperium, within the legions, but he followed Angron. His loyalty had never been to a golden throne or a faceless empire. His loyalty was to the man who had raised him in fire and fury, and Angron was beginning to burn. The Red Angel's outbursts grew more frequent. His eyes, once sharp with disdain, now glowed with something unhinged. Entire squads were killed during his frenzies. Officers were flayed for questioning orders. Whole cities were leveled when only battalions were needed, and Khârn, ever by his side, bore the weight. He became the voice Angron no longer could be. Where the Primarch raged incoherently, Khârn planned. Where Angron destroyed, Khârn rebuilt. But each time the nails drove the Primarch further into madness, Khârn felt his own edges fraying. He began to wonder, was this the fate of all the Legion? Had they truly been designed for war, or simply for self-destruction? The answer came not through revelation, but blood. On the world of Sarion 9, the World Eaters were tasked with pacifying a technocratic rebellion. It was standard compliance, the kind Khârn had done a dozen times before. But something changed. The enemy surrendered before the Legion even landed. They broadcasted terms of peace, promising integration, fealty, tribute. But Angron would not hear it. He declared them liars, weaklings, cowards unworthy of mercy. Khârn protested. He asked, just once, to consider restraint, and Angron struck him. The blow sent Khârn reeling, his jaw broken, ribs shattered. The silence that followed was thicker than blood. No one moved. No one spoke. Khârn stood, wiped the blood from his mouth, and saluted. And then he led the assault himself with twice the fury. The city burned for 3 days. It was said that none screamed louder than Khârn as he tore through the bunkers, as he butchered the children of engineers who had begged for peace. But his eyes were not the eyes of frenzy. They were the eyes of someone who had been reminded. He was not here to question. He was here to conquer. Still, the doubt festered, not in words, not in thought, but in dreams. He saw red sands, burning skies. He heard drums without hands, war cries in dead tongues, and always, always the same voice. Blood must flow. He never spoke of it, not even to Angron, especially not to Angron. Instead, he fought harder. He trained longer. He silenced doubt with carnage. And then came Armatura. The Ultramarines held the world. It was supposed to be a killing stroke, a demonstration of strength. But it became something else. There, on the plains, under burning skies and cracked moons, Khârn met Captain Lotara Sarin of the Conqueror's naval fleet, one of the few officers who treated him not as a weapon, but as a man. She saw the war eating at him, saw the fire behind his eyes slowly becoming ash. They shared no romance, only understanding. That was enough. In her, Khârn found the last mirror of his humanity. But Armatura was not a place for mirrors. It was a furnace. The battle raged for days. Khârn's kill count became legend. It was said that he personally slew 7 Ultramarines captains and 2 dreadnoughts in a single hour, drenched in blue and gold. But even as he fought, the whispers returned, louder than ever. Kill, burn, bleed. It was not victory that awaited him. It was revelation. The contest was no longer against the enemy. It was within himself. And Khorne, Terra's son, Angron's blade, was beginning to lose. Khorne had always known violence. It was the rhythm of his life, the heartbeat that never ceased. But there came a time, a moment in the black tide of the Great Crusade, when violence ceased to be a means to an end and became the end itself. It began on Nuceria, not his world, but his gene father's. a place of broken chains and forgotten oaths, a planet that had forged Angron in fire and rebellion. And it was here, on those cursed plains littered with the bones of gladiators, that Khârn first understood what it truly meant to be a slave. The Emperor, in all his radiant cruelty, had not saved Angron from bondage. He had only changed the shape of the chains. The war against the High Riders, the rebellion of the enslaved gladiators, the slaughter and betrayal that had carved something irreparable into Angron's soul. And the Emperor, in his infinite coldness, had let them all die. Khârn stood beside his father as they walked the dead fields of Nuceria, Angron's eyes hollow with loss. Not a word passed between them. What could be said? The Emperor had stolen Angron from his kin and left them to die. In that silence, Khârn saw something he had never seen before in the Red Angel. Grief, not rage, not wrath, but the raw wound of betrayal. It was the beginning of the end. From that moment on, Angron was no longer the brutal tactician of the early crusade. He was something else, something darker, something broken. And Khârn, he followed, because that was his role, his burden, his purpose. He became Angron's blade, the one who cut where his master pointed, the one who commanded when Angron collapsed into fits of berzerker madness. But more than that, he became the Red Angel's caretaker, holding the Legion together with blood-streaked hands as it spiraled into a deeper abyss. The Butcher's nails, once tools of control, now ruled everything. Angron's were different from the rest, older, cruder, more insidious. The standard implants howled when a warrior wasn't fighting, demanding violence. But Angron's didn't stop, ever. They tore at his mind day and night, making reason impossible, making sleep a myth. Khârn saw it firsthand as the primarch clawed at his own skull, as he destroyed halls with his bare hands, screaming for silence. Khârn never flinched. He stood beside his gene father during every collapse, every psychotic frenzy, absorbing his wrath, taking the blows meant for others. His armor was dented not by enemy fire, but by Angron's fists. Others would have walked away. Others did. But Khârn stayed, because if he didn't, who would? He fought wars the Primarch barely noticed. At the Battle of Gadrus, Angron vanished into the depths of the enemy citadel, lost in a haze of blood. It was Khârn who held the lines, who coordinated the drop-pod assault, who brought the enemy's leadership to heel. When Angron finally emerged, soaked in gore and dragging an entire warlord's ribcage behind him, the war was already won. Angron said nothing. Khârn saluted. This was how it went. Campaign after campaign, the World Eaters devolved further into madness. Discipline collapsed. Vox networks were clogged with incoherent screams. Coordinated tactics gave way to rabid charges and orgiastic slaughter. Apothecaries abandoned their duties. Chaplains tore out their own tongues in the name of silence. And still, Khârn led them, calm, focused, a single red eye in a hurricane of lunacy. But it was never enough. The nails gnawed at him too. He began to feel it, the trembling in his hands after battle, the disappointment when the killing ended, the sense that only rage could silence the noise in his head. He began fighting not because he wanted to, but because he had to, like breathing, like bleeding. He stopped sleeping. He stopped speaking outside of war councils. Even his brothers noticed. Garton, a sergeant he'd once trained personally, tried to intervene during the siege of Merax. He pulled Khârn aside, asked him if he remembered who he was. Khârn decapitated him without a word, not out of hate, but because he had to. Even mercy, even memory, those things became weights, and the nails would not suffer weights. They demanded purity, purity of violence, purity of purpose. And Khârn unwillingly was becoming the nail's most perfect creation. The warp had taken note. Somewhere beyond the veil of real space, Khorne watched. The blood god did not speak in visions or dreams. He spoke in echoes, through the roar of chainswords, through the screams of dying enemies. And Khârn, who did not yet know the name of his patron, began to hear them. It wasn't madness, it was clarity. For the first time in years, things began to make sense. Angron's suffering, the Legion's descent, his own torment, all of it was part of something greater. A test, a path, a crucible. And Khârn, he was being reforged, not as a soldier, not even as a leader, but as a servant, of blood, of rage, of Khorne. When the War Master summoned the legions to the war of the false Imperium, when the whispers of rebellion became screams, Khârn didn't hesitate. He did not question why Horus, once brother and peer, now called for the Emperor's death. It didn't matter. The Imperium was a lie. The Emperor had betrayed Angron, had betrayed all of them. Khârn would follow his father, to Terra, to damnation. And if Khorne awaited him on the other side of the stars, then so be it. Because Khârn no longer feared becoming a slave. He had already been one, and in chains of blood and iron, he would find his freedom. There was a time when even the gods seemed to pause when Khârn entered the fray, not as a beast, not as a mindless killer, but as a shield, unshaken, unbending, the last voice of order in a legion spiraling into rabid madness. Before the name Betrayer became etched into the stars, Khârn was a protector, a warrior not only of blood but of burden. He bore Angron's wrath like armor, and nowhere was that more evident than during the blood wars of the Kondax subsector. The 13th Legion had cleared much of the Orc resistance in the outer systems, but pockets of Greenskin Empire remained buried deep in asteroid belts and ancient hollow moons. The World Eaters were sent not to negotiate, not to cleanse, but to erase. And Angron, ever hungry for slaughter, did not need convincing. Yet even in that madness there was strategy. Khârn ensured it. The initial engagements were brutal and swift. The World Eaters dropped in orbital waves, smashing through Orc fortresses in unrelenting tides of chain blades and plasma fire. But Angron had no interest in pacing. He demanded full acceleration, planet to planet, system to system, with no pause, no recovery. He was chasing something that even he couldn't name, some fury that made him howl when the battles ended too quickly. And the cost began to mount. Entire companies were burned through in hours. Ships ran dry of munitions. Apothecaries stopped retrieving gene seed. Medici bays overflowed with dying Astartes ignored by their own kin. The nails were turning the Legion into animals, their cognition reduced to three things: the roar of engines, the smell of blood, the crash of steel. But Khârn kept going. Not because he didn't see the madness, but because he refused to let it consume everything. On the broken surface of Kolgatha, an Orc forge world encased in metal and magma, the World Eaters became trapped in a mechanized hell of ambush corridors and plasma mines. Angron led the vanguard, slaughtering without concern for the wider war. When the Orcs cut the retreat lines and detonated the gravity wells, hundreds of legionaries were left to die. Khârn did not abandon them. He rerouted his company, his men, and dove into the storm. No orders, no requests, just purpose. He tore through green tides in silence, his chain axe carving arcs of steam through the dense industrial air. His armor was half melted, his vox torn out, but the fire in his eyes never dulled. He reached the survivors and pulled them out by force, dragging wounded Astartes over his shoulder, gunning down anything that moved with bolter fire measured in contempt, not frenzy. And when he emerged, carrying the limp form of a Legion sergeant over broken terrain, Angron met him. The primarchs said nothing. Khârn said nothing in return. But in that quiet, a look passed between them. Not approval, not pride, recognition. The beast still knew the man who followed him. The madness still knew the shield. But that moment would not last, because even Khârn could not stop what was coming. The fall of Angron, an imperial world that had once bent the knee in the earliest days of the Crusade. Angron was a fortress of faith, its population swollen with devotion to the Emperor, its defenses coordinated by an order of the Solar Auxilia known as the Crimson Phalanx. It was also a test. Horus ordered Angron to raise it, not for strategic value, but to see what the World Eaters had become. It was there that Khârn's role as shield took on its truest form. The Crimson Phalanx did not break easily. They fought like warriors of old, holding block by block, building by building. They deployed null field generators to scramble Vox channels. They rerouted orbital guns to create flame corridors that cut off advancing squads. And in that burning chaos, Angron lost himself. He charged ahead, isolated, blind with fury. His rampage severed any hope of coordination, his presence warping the minds of those around him into a frenzy. He tore through friend and foe alike. Khârn hunted him. He stalked through the ash-choked avenues of Angron, searching for the trail of bodies, the splashes of ruined armor, the twisted ceramite where Angron had passed, not to follow, but to catch him, because Angron was dying, and he didn't know it. Every burst of berserk rage pushed the nails deeper. Every battle fed the god behind the curtain, the one who even then loomed over the warp with open hands. Khârn found him in the cathedral square, surrounded by the mangled corpses of Solar Auxilia and half a dozen of their own legionaries. The primarch was on his knees, his hands sunk into the gore of a senior officer, tearing ribs from a body long since dead. Khârn approached slowly. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, tall, silent, unwavering. And for a moment Angron saw him, not as a pawn, not as a legionary, but as the only anchor he had left. And Khârn, in that moment, made a choice. He would not abandon his father. He would not turn his back as the Emperor had. He would be the shield, even as it shattered him. So he rallied what was left of the Legion. He restored order. He coordinated the bombing runs to collapse the last defense bastions. He even retrieved Angron when the Primarch collapsed mid-charge, convulsing, bleeding from the eyes, howling in a language no longer human. No one else could have done it. No one else would have. That night, as the fires burned across Angron, Khârn stood alone atop the basilica spire, watching the world die. Not with pride, not with pleasure, but with weight. Because in protecting Angron from the world, and the world from Angron, he had made himself something the Legion no longer understood. Not a leader, not a warrior, but a witness to what they had become, and what they would never be again. There is no silence in Khârn's world, not anymore. What once passed for quiet, brief moments between battles, solemn pauses before a drop assault, the heartbeat stillness of anticipation, was now filled with a never-ending shriek. It began as a hum, low and dull, vibrating at the base of the skull. Over time, it became a scream, not external, not even mental, but internal, mechanical, organic, demonic, the butcher's nails. Those cursed implants that the World Eaters called their inheritance, their gift, their chain. For Khârn, they were all those things, and more. He remembered the procedure. Not the moment of surgery, that was lost in a haze of restrained panic and numbing agony, but the moment after, when the apothecarian's lights dimmed, when the saw blades were withdrawn from his cranium and the chirurgeons stepped back to examine their work. The pain came in waves, not natural pain like that of broken bones or pierced flesh. Number the Nails brought a different suffering, one woven into thought itself. The implants were not passive tools. They acted. They calculated every flicker of emotion, every delay. Every second Khârn did not want to kill, they punished him. And when he did kill, they rewarded him, flooding his mind with a sense of focus so sharp it bordered on ecstasy. And so the dichotomy began. Khorne, son of Terra, shield of Angron, heir to nothing but violence, was reforged in circuitry and blood. At first he resisted, not outwardly, not in defiance, but inwardly, quietly. He told himself he would not become like the others, that he could control the nails, channel their fury without succumbing to the madness that consumed so many of his brothers. For a time it even seemed true. On the battlefield, Khârn was unparalleled. The nails enhanced his reflexes, his aggression, his awareness. He anticipated attacks before they were made. He struck before his foes could breathe. The pain sharpened him, honed him, like a whetstone across a killing blade. Off the field, however, the agony returned. Every moment of calm felt like drowning. The nails twisted in his skull, chewing at his sense of self. The urge to do, to fight, to strike, to roar, became unbearable. Meditation was impossible, sleep an illusion. Only in motion did the suffering lessen. Only in slaughter did it recede. The apothecaries warned of this, of course. They always did. But by then they were not healers anymore. They were priests of the flesh, caretakers of a legion willingly devouring its soul. And so Khârn endured. He wasn't alone in that endurance. Thousands of world eaters had undergone the same fate. Captains, sergeants, line warriors, they were all slowly remade. Their laughter became snarls. Their tactics gave way to instinct. Their identities unraveled into the red mist of violence. It was not immediate. The nails were patient. They did not kill the warrior. They rewrote him. Even Angron was a victim, especially Angron. His nails, older, cruder, hammered into his head by Nucerian techno-barbarians, never stopped screaming. There was no pause, no relief. His agony was ceaseless, his rage eternal. Khârn had seen it firsthand, the way his primarch shook during briefings, clawing at the base of his skull, the way his eyes twitched, unfocused, the way his voice cracked when speaking too long without violence. The Emperor had seen it too, and left it, allowed the pain, allowed the chain. Khârn never forgot that. He never forgave it either. The primarch of the World Eaters, the Red Angel, was a slave in golden armor, a godling shaped by torture, and the Imperium had taken him in that state, used him, unleashed him. No wonder Angron tore everything apart. No wonder Khârn followed him. But loyalty did not spare Khârn from what was coming. The nails were eating him too. The first breakdown happened after the siege of Praxis 7. The war had been brutal, cavern warfare, close quarters chaos, civilian resistance armed with fusion weapons, and suicidal zeal. Khârn led the assault through the industrial underworks, smashing barricades with his axe, personally killing 6 enemy commanders. And then, silence. The enemy was routed. The mission was over. He stood there, chest heaving, blood dripping from his vambrace. The screams had stopped, the bolters had gone quiet, and the nails began to scream. He staggered, dropped to one knee, tore off his helmet to breathe. But nothing helped. He pressed his fists against his temples, teeth grinding, eyes bloodshot. It felt like his brain was melting. No, boiling. Like the pressure of 10,000 dead voices roaring in unison, demanding more. More death, more pain, more slaughter. Only later would he learn that this was normal, that this was how the implants worked, that their pain wasn't a glitch, but a feature by design. Because the nails were not invented, they were inspired. Khârn wasn't sure when the realization came. Perhaps on that cursed ship en route to Nuceria, Or perhaps during one of Angron's more lucid rants, when the primarch's blood-slicked hands trembled and he whispered about how the pain never stopped. But eventually, Khorne understood. The nails were not simply machines. They were transmitters, conduits. They tuned the minds of their victims to a frequency not of science, but of the warp, to a god, Khorne, the blood god, he who watches all battles, he who drinks the souls of the slain, he who rewards the strong and forgets the weak. The butcher's nails were an altar, every pulse of pain an offering, every scream a litany, every death a prayer. And Khârn had been praying for years without knowing it. He tried to deny it, even as the symbols of Khorne appeared scratched into bulkhead walls, even as his brothers began chanting unknowable syllables before battle, even as blood sacrifices became ritual. But denial did not stop the dreams of brass thrones atop mountains of skulls, of rivers of blood that stretched into infinity, of a voice that did not speak words but spoke truths. Khârn did not worship. He was not weak like the word-bearers, groveling at the feet of demons. But deep inside he knew. He was not just a soldier anymore. He was a vessel. And so the nails no longer seemed foreign. They were part of him. A second heartbeat, a whisper between breaths. In the days before the siege of Terra, Khârn stood before the mirror of his personal war chamber aboard the Conqueror. He stared at his own reflection, armor stained red, eyes sunken and wild. He tapped the side of his head. The nails pulsed. He smiled, not out of joy, not out of pride, but because he finally understood. This was never about serving the Emperor, nor even serving Angron. This was about the nails, about what they had revealed, about what they were leading him toward. Khârn was no longer afraid of what he was becoming, because there was no becoming left. There was only being. And in the endless shriek of the butcher's nails, in that blessed agony that devoured his thoughts and silenced his doubts, Khârn the Betrayer was born. It was not just betrayal, it was something deeper, darker. The Istvan system had always been a place of grim importance in the history of the Great Crusade, a rebellious cluster of forge worlds and manufactora that once tried to resist the Emperor's unity. It had been subdued early on, its leadership executed, its forges realigned. But in the wake of the War Master's rebellion, Istvan became more than a symbol of resistance. It became the site of cleansing. It became the crucible in which brotherhood would be shattered forever, and Khârn the Bloody stood at its heart. The orders had been clear. The Emperor's children, the World Eaters, the Death Guard, and the Sons of Horus were to deploy to Istvan III to quell a fresh uprising from loyalist elements who remained faithful to Terra. But those orders were a lie, crafted not for suppression but for slaughter. A test, a purge, a massacre. The rebels weren't traitors at all. They were loyalists, remnants of the legions who had refused to follow Horus into heresy. Men like Garviel Loken, Saul Tarvitz, and Lord Commander Eidolon's own doubters. Warriors who had once shared meat and oath with Khârn, now marked for death. Khârn knew none of this as his drop pod howled through the void. He had been briefed like the others, his voice calm, his thoughts focused, his armor freshly painted crimson and brass, his chain axe gore-child whirring in eager pulses. By the time his boots slammed into the irradiated soil of Istvan III, he was ready for war, and war welcomed him. The capital spire burned. Loyalist forces had turned the city into a fortress. Melta cannons roared from balconies. Vox lines were filled with screams. Khârn led the assault on the eastern barricade, carving through a dozen solar auxilia and 5 loyalist Astartes in the first hour alone. But as the battle reached its crescendo, as the World Eaters surged deeper into the shattered city, something happened. The skies changed. A roar split the atmosphere. A moment later, the fire fell. Virus bombs, uncountable canisters, dropped from orbit, delivered by their own fleet. They didn't just target the enemy, they targeted everyone. The sky bloomed into an unnatural emerald blaze. The bombs detonated not with thunder, but with a hiss, releasing the Life-Eater virus, a weapon so potent it liquefied organic matter in seconds. Civilians, soldiers, loyalists, traitors. It didn't matter. The flesh boiled, bones turned to ash. The air screamed. Khârn had been on the western ridge when it hit. He watched in horror as his Vox lit up with cries for help, desperate calls from World Eaters and Death Guard both. Men begging for evacuation, clawing their way toward shelters that no longer existed. He didn't speak. He couldn't. He stood among the falling ash, his skin blistering inside his armor, his lungs burning with chemical smoke, and for the first time in years, the butcher's nails were silent. Even they didn't know how to scream in this moment. Then came the firestorm. The virus bombs were only the beginning. The Life-Eater cleared the city of life. The firestorm cleared it of everything else. From orbit, phosphex and incendiary payloads rained down in waves. The city's skeleton cracked. Its towers fell. What remained of Istvan III was not a ruin. It was a grave. Khârn survived only because of his armor's seal and the bunker his squad seized beneath a charred manufactorum. He clawed his way out hours later, coughing blood, his armor melted and slagged, his skin raw. And yet, he was not alone. Others had survived. Tarvitz, Loken, even some of the Emperor's children, disgusted by the treachery of their primarch. What followed was not war, but vengeance. For weeks, the survivors of Istvan III, those loyal to the Imperium and those cast aside by their own commanders, fought a hopeless, furious campaign of resistance against the traitor legions. The loyalists were outnumbered, outgunned, hunted by their own brothers. But they refused to die quietly. Khârn was ordered to lead hunt squads through the irradiated wastes. He tracked loyalist kill teams through molten sewers and collapsed basilicas, his axe ever thirsty. But with each engagement, with each loyalist he faced down, something inside him twisted. Because these men weren't cowards, they weren't heretics, they were him, or at least who he had once been. And when he fought them, it was different. Not like the battles of the Great Crusade, not like the contests against Xenos or planetary rebels. These weren't enemies of the Imperium, they were the Imperium. And the nails screamed in confusion. They didn't care for politics, they didn't understand betrayal. They only knew blood. Khârn tried to convince himself, to focus, to obey Angron, obey Horus. But then he encountered Captain Balrin of the World Eaters, one of his own, a loyalist, a warrior who refused to join Horus. They met in the shattered ruins of a cathedral, bones crunching beneath their boots, the wind howling with radiation. Balrin didn't attack first. He lowered his weapon. He asked Khârn one question. "Is this what you wanted?" And Khârn killed him. Not because of orders, not because of hatred, but because if he hadn't, if he had listened, something would have broken in him that couldn't be put back together. The nails demanded it, and Khârn obeyed. But that question never left him. Is this what you wanted? By the time the final stronghold of the Loyalists was buried beneath orbital bombardment, Khârn had become something else. Not a soldier, not even a killer, but a tool. A mechanism in a larger machine built of lies and ash. He emerged from Istvan III, bloodied, his armor scorched, his eyes vacant. The nails had been fed, but something in him had died, and as the fleet moved toward Istvan Fih, toward the full-scale decapitation of the Loyalist legions, Khârn stared out at the void from the deck of the Conqueror. and for the first time he felt no pride, only dread. Because if this was what their war required, then what else would he be forced to become? They said the city of Tizca was the most beautiful in the galaxy, and for a fleeting moment, Khârn believed it. From orbit before the descent, he stood within the thunder-lit hangar of the Conqueror, gazing through the void screen at the silver-blue globe below. Prospero gleamed like a polished gem against the darkness of space, crowned in spires that shimmered with psychic auras, ringed with aurorae that pulsed like veins beneath the atmosphere. Even the clouds moved with unnatural elegance, as if sculpted by thought alone. But Khârn was not a man given to awe. His eyes narrowed. His grip tightened on the haft of Gorachild. The nails had already begun to stir, not from rage but from a slow, rising tension, a pressure that clawed behind his eyes and hissed behind his ears. Not of battle, not yet. It was the warp. The planet watched him. Prospero didn't radiate like other worlds. It didn't smolder with defense turrets or shake with subterranean reactors. It resonated. It hummed, not with noise but with sentience. And Khârn felt it. So did the World Eaters around him. Veterans from Genna and Armatura, war-hardened berzerkers with nothing left to feel, they felt it too. Some muttered battle prayers, others bared their teeth. A few tore into their own flesh before the drop, just to keep the nails quiet. This world unnerved them. This wasn't a campaign. This was an execution, and they were the blade. The orders were clear. Russ had been unleashed. Magnus had betrayed the Imperium by violating the Edict of Nicaea, casting his psychic warning to Terra, shattering untold wards and protections in the process. The Red Cyclops had dared to speak against the Emperor. The punishment was war, but war under false pretenses. War built on silence. The War Master's betrayal had not yet been revealed. The wolves were the tip of the spear, but Angron had insisted his sons would not stand idle. He had demanded blood, and Khârn led the charge. When the drop pods screamed through Prospero's upper atmosphere, the light bled into every shade of crimson and violet. The city stretched out beneath them like a lattice of obsidian glass and arcane symmetry, its architecture flawless, precise, almost sacred in its cold elegance. The first to land were the wolves. They fell like meteors, howling and furious, smashing through wards and walls with brute force. The World Eaters followed in a different rhythm, not chaotic, not frenzied. Not yet. Khârn hit the ground with calm brutality. He rose from the crater his pod carved and found himself surrounded by a marble courtyard ringed with translucent pylons. Statues of robed scholars lined the walls. Glyphs shimmered in the air, changing language as they were read. 1,000 eyes watched him. Not real eyes, but the eyes of the past, of knowledge, of judgment. And still he pressed forward. His company spread through Tizca like a crack in porcelain, not with speed but with force. They weren't hunting rebels or suppressing mobs. They were facing Astartes, the Thousand Sons, warriors bred like themselves, armed, armored, and dangerous in ways the World Eaters were not prepared for. It began with fire, not flame, but psychic combustion. Men in red armor lifted their palms and incinerated whole squads in seconds. Plasma bolts bent mid-air, blades twisted before they struck. The World Eaters howled with rage, but rage was not enough to face sorcery. Khârn adapted. He did what no one expected. He thought. He observed, tracked patterns, identified signs. He found the rhythms in the enemy's war chant and struck when their casting faltered. He timed his charges between psychic discharges. He used corpses as shields when their warp flame reached for him, and when he closed the distance, nothing saved them. Not sigils, not precognition, not fate. Gorechild sang. Khârn carved through the elite of the Thousand Sons, scattering their rubricae, disrupting their covens. But every step forward came at a cost. The nails were beyond screaming now. They throbbed like war drums in his skull, demanding slaughter. But Prospero's resistance denied him satisfaction. These weren't cowards. They fought with honor, with desperation. They believed they were defending something worth preserving, and that made the nails furious. In the ruins of the Telescopium, Khârn fought alongside a splinter unit of space wolves and sons of Horus, pinning down a trio of sorcerers who had manifested a storm of living shadows. The fighting lasted 6 hours, and only ended when Khârn, soaked in molten ceramite and his own blood, tackled the lead psyker through a force field and decapitated him mid-incantation. The backlash flattened the plaza. Khârn rose alone, and the voices in his skull quieted for a moment. He should have felt triumph. Instead, he felt tainted. The longer he walked Prospero's broken streets, the more he noticed things the nails couldn't twist. A dead legionary, hand still clutching the data pad of a spell half-written. A teacher shielding students with his body. A rubrikai corpse, slumped against a mural of stars, still holding a book he would never finish reading. Khârn turned away from each, but he remembered, not out of guilt, but out of unease. Because Prospero refused to be like the other slaughtered worlds. It fought with mind and meaning, not just blade and fang. And each time he killed one of its sons, he felt as if he was erasing something important. Not sacred, not innocent, but true. By the time he reached the final engagement at the Pyramid of Photep, the heart of the Thousand Suns cult structure, Khârn's mind was fraying. The World Eaters had been given no clear command beyond kill and destroy. Russ had Magnus pinned. Angron had vanished into his own fury, carving halls through the subterranean levels. Vox Lynx buzzed with madness. Khârn marched alone. Inside the pyramid, the walls breathed. There were no defenders, just echoes, whispers of knowledge etched into crystal, lessons encoded in the structure itself. And as he walked, he felt watched not by eyes, but by thoughts. He found a chamber of mirrors, each one reflecting not his face, but his past. Terra, Nuceria, the day he received the nails. The moment Angron called him son. And one more, the girl from Istvan, the psyker child. "You were fire before the metal," she said again. He screamed. He shattered the mirrors, shattered himself. The nails roared in approval. Gore-child struck the walls until blood coated his vision. When he emerged from the pyramid, the battle was over. Magnus had fled into the warp. The Thousand Suns were broken. And Prospero, the jewel of the Imperium, lay in dust. The wolves sang victory. The World Eaters howled. Khârn said nothing. He stood amid the ruins, his armor cracked and steaming, and looked up at the night sky. There were no stars, only the reflection of fire on ash. And in that stillness, Prospero whispered its final lesson. Everything worth knowing must be burned, and Khârn, the executioner, would never not hear it again. The skies above Armatura wept fire, not metaphor, not poetry. Fire, real apocalyptic fire, cast from orbit by fleets bearing the Eye of Horus and the snarling maw of the 12th Legion. War had come to Ultramar, and Armatura, jewel of the 500 worlds, stood at the edge of annihilation. Khârn watched the flames descend from the viewing deck of the Conqueror. Around him, the bridge roared with activity, vox calls, tactical relays, data feeds streaming in from orbiting cruisers. But he heard none of it. The nails were singing, not screaming, not yet. They knew what was coming, and they hungered for it. The attack on Armatura wasn't simply a strike, it was a statement. The World Eaters weren't just sent to burn cities, they were sent to break hope. Robut Gillimain had created a shining empire, a realm of order in a galaxy ruled by entropy. His people lived with dignity. His worlds thrived with structure. Armatura embodied that dream, a bastion of ultramarine culture, knowledge, and loyalty. And now it would be Khârn's anvil. He had grown quieter since Prospero. Not more docile, never that, but inward. The whispers of that burning world lingered in his mind like the echo of a scream that never truly stopped. He had come to Armatura not as the shield of the Red Angel, nor as a questioner of guilt. He came as judgment. The drop pods fell like spears, striking the capital's surface in coordinated, thunderous waves. Imperial bastions shuddered beneath the shockwaves. Towers cracked. Civilian districts vanished beneath impact craters. Khârn's pod slammed into the plaza of the great courthouse. By the time the dust cleared, he had already moved. Gorechild roared to life. The first defenders were ultramarines in ceremonial blue and white, taken by surprise as the World Eaters erupted from their steel coffins like demons made real. Khârn cut a path through the first formation, his chain axe chewing through power armor and flesh with equal ease. But these were not heretics, not psychers, not traitors. They were loyalists, and they fought well. For every Marine Khârn cut down, 2 more filled the breach. The Ultramarines weren't just disciplined, they were coordinated, cohesive. They fought with purpose, and it made every second of combat a torment the nails could not resolve. They hated the restraint. They gnawed harder. Khârn broke through the first 3 defensive lines with a squad of his most brutal berzerkers, men like Vordak the Maulus and Hekran Forge Eater, warriors whose names had been stripped of meaning and given to infamy. They charged not with tactics, but with intent. The Ultramarines met them in kind, and the plaza became a slaughterhouse. Khârn felt every moment in vivid detail, not with clarity of thought, but clarity of violence, the thrum of his chain axe as it tore through a sergeant's throat, the splash of coolant from a dreadnought's ruptured spine, the hiss of blood boiling against molten ceramite. Yet even as he moved, even as he thrived, Khârn watched. There was something alien about the calm in the enemy's eyes. They fought without panic, without hatred, not because they were empty, but because they were whole. Each Ultramarine bled for something larger than himself. They fought for duty, and Khârn felt none of it. There was no glory in what he did, only noise. And then came the artillery. The word-bearers had breached the southern bastion, unleashing demonic entities into the Manufactorum district. Mortarian's fleets poisoned the atmosphere with viral payloads. The air thickened with fog and ash. The sounds of war grew distant, muffled by dust storms conjured by warp-tainted winds. In the haze, Khârn lost all sense of time. He fought until his gauntlets cracked, until his armor ran red, until even the nails grew quiet. Then he reached the Citadel Arcus, the final stronghold of the Armaturan resistance. A towering obsidian monolith carved from pre-imperial stone, its walls etched with pick scripts of Ultramar's founding. And there, waiting atop its blood-slicked steps, stood Captain Andros Tyran of the 13th Legion. A hero, a tactician, a man, the kind of warrior the World Eaters hadn't produced in centuries. Khârn remembered every second of their duel. Andros fought like a machine, every movement precise, every parry measured. His blade, Honorum, sang against Gorechild. Their clash shattered the plaza around them. Sparks lit the dusk. Storms formed above. The ground trembled with the weight of 2 destinies colliding. Khârn bled first. Andros scored a cut along his ribs, deep, surgical. For a moment, the nails recoiled. Pain, but not from slaughter. It confused them. Khârn responded with a blow that nearly broke Andros' sword arm. Armor cracked, blood poured. But Andros did not fall. He stepped back. He asked a question. Why? Khorne froze, not long, a second, half a second, but he hesitated, and the nails screamed. He struck again and again and again, driven by a fury no longer his own. The battle became not a duel, but a dismemberment. Andros fell to one knee, then both. His blade dropped. His eyes remained fixed on Khorne, defiant. "You used to fight for something," he said. The axe fell. Khorne did not answer, because there was no answer. The citadel fell with Andros's death, and Armatura, once proud and gleaming, drowned in fire and ruin. By nightfall, the Ultramarines had retreated to orbit. Guilliman would later recount this day as one of the darkest hours in Ultramar's history, a moment of horror when the gods of order beheld the true face of chaos and found it grinning. Khorne walked the ruins in silence. The nails had gone quiet, but not in peace. They were satisfied, for now. He looked up at the burning sky, the stars hidden by smoke and orbital fire, and felt nothing. Not triumph, not sorrow, not guilt, only momentum. The war would move again, to Nuceria, to Terra, to oblivion, and Khorne would follow, not as a hero, not even as a warrior, but as the axe that never stopped swinging, as the butcher the galaxy had begged for without knowing the price. The Red Angel came home. It was not a return marked by banners or fanfare. There were no celebrations, no parades of liberation, only war, the kind that tore through memory as viciously as it tore through stone and blood. For Khorne, the war for Nuceria was not a campaign. It was a reckoning. The World Eaters returned to the world of Angron suffering, with fire in their eyes and vengeance in their hearts. The Butcher of the Warhounds had never forgiven the planet that had shackled him, forced him to fight in the gladiator pits, and killed his comrades on the eve of their rebellion. The Emperor's intervention had stolen Angron's vengeance. Now, centuries later, he would take it in full. Khorne stood beside his Gene Father in the command chamber of the Conqueror, watching the world spin in the void like a dying ember. Nuceria looked sick from space, its once vast oceans dried to blood-colored basins, its mountainous chains twisted with mining scars, its cities swollen with wealth looted from generations of slaves. The High Riders still ruled, still watched from their palaces of marble and gold, lording over millions of disposable lives. Khorne didn't feel rage when he looked upon Nuceria. He felt clarity. This was not just the origin of Angron's pain. This was the origin of all of them. The gladiator pits, the nails, the Legion's descent into madness. It all started here, and it would end here. They struck without warning. The fleet began its assault with continent-scaled orbital bombardments. Mountains cracked, cities crumbled, oceans boiled. Angron personally led the first wave, descending without formation into the capital continent of Deshelica, like a storm given form. Khorne followed. Of course he did. The nails howled with anticipation. Gorechild trembled in his grip. But unlike the other battles, Prospero, Armatura, Istvan, Khorne felt something else. Not sorrow, not rage, purpose. He was not here to slaughter nameless enemies. He was here to finish something. The dropship tore through the skies like a spear. Fire trailed behind it as Khorne leapt before it could even fully land, landing in a roll amid the burning remains of a palatial skywalk. Resistance met them immediately. The Nucerian elite guard, ornately armored, well-trained, and suicidal in their defiance, opened fire from defensive walls. Khorne didn't wait for support. He moved forward, boots cracking bone and charred tile, Gorechild spinning in fluid arcs. The defenders fought with desperation, but it wasn't enough. Khorne moved through them like a blade through silk. For every slash of a halberd, for every last round aimed true, a dozen were repaid in kind. His brothers followed behind him, screaming their oaths, cutting down any who resisted. But Khorne was looking for someone else. not a warrior, a ghost. The palace halls were still familiar. The architecture hadn't changed much since the day Angron escaped those pits. Khârn had studied those layouts, pored over them, memorized every floor, every cell, every throne. He didn't want to fight here. He wanted to see, wanted to understand. It was there, deep in the spinal chambers of the palace, past the blood-slicked stairwells and collapsed archways, that Khârn found what remained of the pitmaster's arena. It was smaller than he expected. A colosseum, yes, but modest. Cold, carved into the stone of the capital mountain. The central arena was cracked, its pillars toppled. Rows upon rows of seats lay in silence, watched over by crumbling statues of noblemen who had died centuries before. But in the silence, Khârn could hear it. The roar of the crowds, the clash of chain axes, the cries of dying slaves. He saw the past flicker before his eyes, not visions, not sorcery, just memory. Angron, chained and bleeding. The 12 scars standing in a ring, their bodies covered in wounds, defiant even in death. The night the Emperor came, the betrayal, and Khârn stood there, alone, while the battle raged above, not weeping, not speaking, just feeling, until Angron came. He did not walk, he did not speak, he erupted. The Red Angel tore through the archway like a predator freed from a cage, blood streaming from open wounds, the butcher's nails exposed and gleaming. He saw the arena and froze. For a moment, even he was still, and then he screamed. It was not a roar of fury, but of grief. Khârn had never heard his gene-father make such a sound. Angron collapsed to his knees. Khârn stepped forward but did not speak. He didn't have to. The two stood there, side by side, surrounded by the ghosts of the past. The nails fell silent in Khârn's mind. He could almost hear his own thoughts again. And in that quiet, something changed. Angron rose slowly. He did not look at Khârn. He raised his hand and pointed, not at the arena, not at the palace, but at the city beyond. The judgment had not yet been delivered. What followed was not a battle. It was an extermination. The World Eaters swept through Nuceria like a red tide. Every noble house, every pit master descendant, every overseer and slaver and tyrant who had stood on the backs of the broken, they burned. Khârn led the charge into the Grand Bastille of Meros Shah. The ruling dynasts had sealed themselves within, protected by centuries of defenses. It did not matter. Khârn cracked the gate himself, not with melta charges, but with rage. His axe bit through adamantium, his fists crushed armored throats, and when he reached the High Council's throne chamber, he paused, just once, to see them cowering. The men who had created Angron, the legacy that had damned them all. They begged, pleaded. Khârn said nothing. He simply executed them, one by one, not with fury, with precision. Justice, as only the damned could deliver it. By the end of the day, the skies over Nuceria were black. The ocean steamed with heat from the orbital fires. The World Eaters had left no city untouched. Every symbol of the old regime was razed, every chain broken, every pit filled. Khârn stood beside Angron on the highest peak of the capital, watching the flames consume the world. "Is it done?" he asked quietly. Angron did not answer. Instead, the Red Angel lifted his face to the sky and roared. It echoed for miles, through the burning valleys, through the empty prisons, through the broken arenas, and the nails inside Khârn's skull sang with it. But this time, it wasn't pain, it was release. In that moment, something unspoken passed between father and son. Not peace, not forgiveness, but understanding. The past had been buried, but not forgotten. Nuceria was dead, and with it, the last fragment of what the World Eaters could have been. Khârn turned away from the flames, his footsteps heavy, the weight of purpose fulfilled dragging behind him like a corpse on a chain. He did not look back. There was no reason to. There was nothing left to save. Terra. The name itself echoed across the stars, not merely a planet, not even just a throne world, but the heart of humanity. Billions of pilgrims had wept at the thought of setting foot upon its soil. Countless billions more had died trying to claim it. Now, as the Horus heresy reached its crescendo, the sons of the Emperor came home, some to defend, others to desecrate. Khârn arrived among the latter. The siege of Terra had begun, and the World Eaters were at its vanguard. They had burned New Syria, torn through Ultramar, crushed resistance in the Cyclops cluster, and broken loyalist holdouts across the Segmentum Solar. But none of it mattered now. Terra was the goal. Terra was the end. The Conqueror entered the Sol system behind a shield of traitor fleets, an armada of monstrous scale, bristling with warp-scarred ships and demonic power. The stars themselves seemed dim in its presence, the void folding in ways it was never meant to. From the bridge, Khârn watched the massed defenses of the Imperium flare into action. Luna's orbital platforms opened fire. Saturn's forge moons spat fire and dreadnoughts. The sky turned into a battlefield, and still the traitors pushed forward. There was no fear, only inevitability. They descended not as warriors, but as executioners. The World Eaters were given their target, the Lion's Gate spaceport, a towering bastion of adamantium and stone, ringed with void shields and defended by the full might of the Imperial Army, Titan Guard, and elements of the White Scars and Imperial Fists. It was the central artery by which supplies, reinforcements, and orbital access were maintained. If it fell, the traitors would have a direct route into the palace's heart. Angron volunteered for the assault. Khârn followed him. The drop was cataclysmic. Khârn's Stormbird plummeted through layers of flak and anti-orbital fire, trailing smoke and fire. One wing was torn clean off during re-entry. Still, he leapt into the void before impact, crashing to Earth amidst a field of ferrocrete and shattered bodies. The nails screamed in elation. He rose, his armor scarred and hissing with vapor, Gorechild already spinning in his hand. All around him, the battlefield boiled. Thunderhawks plummeted from the skies. Drop pods embedded themselves like blades in the earth. Traitor titans stalked through ash clouds. Void shields flickered. Debris fell from orbit in burning arcs. And in the center of it all, rising like a mountain of steel and fire, stood the Lion's Gate. Its battlements bristled with macro batteries. Its walls, kilometers high, were etched with centuries of oaths and martyrdom. White scars on jet bikes flitted like ghosts between the towers, intercepting warbands with surgical strikes. Imperial fists manned the battlements, unshakable and grim. Khârn didn't blink. He charged. Behind him came the 12th Legion in full. The assault began not with guns, but with howls. World Eaters poured across the plains in a tidal wave of red, smashing into trench lines and defense grids like the fist of a forgotten god. Khârn carved through the first defensive cordon in minutes, tearing through barricades, crushing servitors, and beheading command officers before they could cry out. The defenders tried to regroup. They failed. Khârn led a flanking assault through the Hab block ruins, striking from behind a bastion meant to funnel attackers into the kill zone. His company, those still capable of cohesion, followed him with slavering glee. They were already lost to the nails. Khârn? Not yet, not quite. The battlefield turned to madness. Phosphex bombs turned men into liquid screams. Cyclonic torpedoes vaporized entire districts. Warp fire consumed tank battalions as word-bearers summoned entities best left unnamed. The sky became a canvas of ruin, and through it all, Khârn moved like a crimson ghost. He faced white scars in open combat, fast, precise warriors who struck with the speed of lightning and the grace of dancers. For a moment, they held the line. For a moment, they matched him. But only for a moment. Khârn learned. He timed his swings, anticipated the turns, broke engines with his bare hands. One by one, he dragged them from their bikes and split them in half. Not out of hatred, out of necessity. The nails demanded no less. Still, resistance stiffened. The Imperial fists had deployed a full shield company to the inner wall. Their fortifications were perfect, interlocking fields of fire, heavy bolter nests, repulsor grids, kill zones measured down to the centimeter. They fought without emotion. They did not retreat. They did not break. Khârn respected them. He killed them anyway. At the base of the Lion's Gate, he met Shield Captain Vortan Helvius, a demigod of the Adeptus Custodes, clad in auramite and wielding a guardian spear. For the first time in days, Khârn felt challenged. Helvius moved with supernatural speed, countering each blow, predicting each swing. The custodian struck with brutal elegance, his blade scoring deep gouges into Khârn's armor. But Helvius was defending something. Khârn was not. He was the embodiment of offense. Every missed parry, every glance, every inch of blood, it all added up. Khârn bled, but he pressed. Again, again, again. The nails were howling. The axe was spinning. And then, contact. Gorechild bit deep into Helvius's chest. The custodian reeled. The second blow severed his arm. The third split his helm. The fourth ended him. Khârn stood over the corpse, panting, blood dripping from his vambroses. Not from triumph, not from joy, but because he had to. There was no glory in this, only function. The gate was breached an hour later. The traitor forces poured through. Titans advanced. Demons howled. World Eaters flooded the inner yards, hacking down what remained of the defenders. Khârn pushed forward, dragging the banner of the 12th Legion into the Citadel Square, planting it into the bones of the last loyalist commander. He looked up at the sky, now a burning canopy of smoke and ash, and realized they had done it. The Lion's Gate had fallen, but the palace remained, and the Emperor still lived. The war was not over, not yet. But Khârn, he felt it. The end was coming. Not the end of the siege, the end of himself. He walked the blood-drenched plaza alone as his brothers celebrated, as Angron roared, as the skies wept flame. The nails had gone silent, not out of peace, but out of anticipation. They were saving their voice. For what came next? For the betrayal that would make all others look like mercy. Khârn remembered dying. It wasn't the kind of memory shaped by time or the comfort of reflection. It wasn't a quiet thought in the moments between battles. Number. His death had been violent, and it was etched into every nerve ending, every scar, every pulse of pain still rattling through his skull like a prayer from a dead god. The siege of Terra had ended. The traitors had failed. Horus, their war master, their would-be god-king, had fallen. Slain by the Emperor aboard the vengeful spirit, his final breath lost to the cold silence of betrayal. The war that had consumed the galaxy was over, on paper. But for the World Eaters, for Khârn, it had only just begun. They were denied. The last battle had been ripped from them. Angron had never reached the Golden Throne. Khârn had fought to the walls of the Sanctum Imperialis itself, and no farther. The final kill, the last drop of blood that would end the Emperor's false rule, had been denied them by fate, by cowardice, by something beyond even the nail's comprehension, and Khârn had not handled it well. He didn't remember who struck the first blow on that final day aboard the Conqueror. Perhaps it was Captain Drakari preaching about retreat and consolidation. Perhaps it was Apothecary Wren who dared speak of discipline. Whoever it was, they died screaming. Then came the others, all of them. Every World Eater on that ship had snapped. The siege had ended. The war had ended. But the Nails did not care. They only knew hunger. And when there was no enemy left to kill, they turned the Legion upon itself. The massacre aboard the Conqueror was more than a mutiny. It was a purge. Brotherhood was abandoned, ranks shattered, names forgotten. They fought for hours, no sides, no leaders, just fury. And Khârn? He didn't stop. Not when his brothers begged, not when he was surrounded, not even when the command deck burned and airlocks began to fail. He kept killing, until he was killed. It wasn't a glorious end. He didn't fall in battle against a mighty champion. He didn't die in a duel with Angron or bleed out before the throne of Khorne. He was torn apart, ripped by a dozen blades from former brothers, beaten with the butt of a power maul, stabbed through the chest with a servo arm torn from a dead apothecary. His lungs collapsed, his heart stopped. He died alone in a corridor filled with smoke and blood. And then he woke up. The resurrection wasn't immediate. Time doesn't flow normally in the eye of terror. It coils, loops, hungers. For Khârn, death was not a passage into nothingness. It was a threshold. Something had watched his death with satisfaction, something ancient, something patient. Khorne, the blood god, had been watching for a long time, not as a father, not as a master, as an artist. And Khârn, broken and torn, was his chosen canvas. When Khârn awoke, he did not breathe. There was no gasp, no panic, only the taste of iron. The room was gone. The ship was gone. He stood in an endless field of skulls beneath a sky that boiled with crimson clouds. Rivers of blood flowed uphill. Brass spires twisted toward stars that wept fire. It was not a vision. It was not a dream. It was real. He was in the realm of Khorne. And the blood God spoke, not in words, not in language, but in violence. Khorne fought for centuries in that place. Time bled. He battled endless hordes of demons, faced champions of gods long forgotten. Each death taught him something. Each scar carved his purpose deeper. He was not training. He was transforming. He had been a weapon. Now he would be a legend. When he returned, when the portal opened and Khârn stepped back into real space, it wasn't aboard the Conqueror. That ship was long gone, lost to madness. It was on the demon world of Scalathrax, where the World Eaters had torn each other apart once again, this time permanently. Khârn emerged from the black winds with no banner, no brothers, only Gorechild, reforged and howling. He was different. His armor was no longer white and blue. It was rusted crimson, crusted with old blood and demonic sigils. His helm was gone. His face, exposed, pale, blood-specked, wore a constant expression of emptiness. Not calm, not peace, just absence. Like there was nothing left inside him but fury. The survivors of the Legion flocked to him, not out of loyalty, out of fear. They had seen him die. They had buried him in legend. Now he walked among them again, untouched by time, wielding a chain axe that had tasted the blood of gods. He did not speak. He did not lead. He simply killed. Every war zone, every planet, every cultist uprising. Khârn would appear, often alone, sometimes with a pack of blood-crazed followers. He would slaughter indiscriminately, loyalists, heretics, civilians, demons. It didn't matter. If there was blood to spill, he spilled it. Some tried to reason with him. Commanders of the traitor legions sent emissaries. Lords of chaos offered titles. Demon princes sought to bring him into their schemes. All of them died. Khârn did not serve. He did not kneel. He was unbound, a force of nature, a hurricane of blades and fury. He became a name spoken in whispers by the Imperium and Chaos alike. Imperial scribes referred to him as the Betrayer, though no one remembered exactly why. His legend only grew with time. Entire companies of Astartes were wiped out by him alone. Armies broke when they heard his name. He had no warband. He had no base. He needed none. Wherever blood flowed, wherever war raged, Khârn would arrive, drawn by the scent, by the screams, by the gravity of carnage. And yet, even now, even after death, even after resurrection, he remembered Terra, Nuceria, the arena, the question. Is this what you wanted? And somewhere, buried beneath 10,000 corpses and 100,000 screams, Khârn no longer knew the answer. There are no oaths in the eye of terror, not in the way mortals understand them. No contracts signed, no vows spoken before witnesses, no parchment sealed with wax or blood. In the eye, promises are made in pain, pacts are written in agony, and for Khârn, the only vow that ever mattered was made the day he stopped serving anything but slaughter. There was no ceremony to mark it, no audience, only corpses and silence. Khârn stood atop a mountain of skulls, literal, not metaphorical. The remnants of a Black Templar's crusade force that had attempted to purge the demon forge of Vortrex Prime, only to find him waiting instead. It hadn't been a planned ambush. It hadn't even been a battle he sought. Khârn simply arrived, drawn by bloodshed like a moth to flame. The Templars mistook him for a warband champion. By the time they realized the mistake, it was too late. Khârn had torn through them like wind through dry leaves. The Templars had fought with discipline, with fury, with prayers and holy litanies screamed into the void. He didn't care. They bled. That was enough. As the last of them fell, Chaplain Arian, broken across a rusted statue of the Omnissiah, Khârn dropped to one knee in the stillness and stared at his hands. He turned them slowly, watching the blood drip off the fingers of his gauntlets, thick and dark like oil. They trembled, not with fear, with hunger. The nails had gone beyond screaming. They had become something else entirely. Not voices, not pain, instinct. They were part of him now, as natural as breath. But the silence after a kill, the emptiness, that never faded. Khârn rose. He stepped over the chaplain's corpse and made his way into the shell of the forged temple. Its spires had long since crumbled, its data vaults fried by warp storms. The halls were cold, abandoned. But within its deepest chamber, where the ritual furnaces once burned, he found a relic of forgotten purpose, an oath stone, cracked, dust-covered. Khârn approached it slowly, not reverently. He was incapable of reverence now, but with the weight of memory pressing down on his spine. He remembered the first oath he'd ever spoken. Terra, the ceremony in the recruitment vaults. To serve the Emperor with blade, blood, and breath until death or victory. How far that oath had fallen, how irrelevant it had become. But the concept remained, even if the words were meaningless. And so, in that dead forged temple, Khârn made a new one. He placed his bloody palm on the stone, and in a voice dry as desert wind, he whispered, "I swear to the war eternal." It wasn't flowery, it wasn't poetic, but it was real, because Khârn understood what he had become. Not a warrior, not a captain, not even a champion of Khorne, but a beacon, an avatar of the truth behind all lies, that in the end there is only blood, only war, that all structures, Imperium or Chaos, are illusions, temporary, built on sand. Only violence is forever, and he would be its prophet. From that moment on, Khârn stopped running with warbands. He refused command, refused to lead, refused to serve. When asked for orders, he answered with silence or a killing blow. He wore no heraldry save the brass skull on his pauldron. He stopped painting his armor. The red that caked it was no longer pigment, but the dried remnants of 1,000 battlefields. Rust, bone dust, coagulated death. It had become his new heraldry. Gorechild never left his hand, and the axe of dismemberment, his other weapon, once a ceremonial chain axe from the gladiatorial pits of Nuceria, was reforged with demon iron. He never drew it unless the nails demanded escalation. When both axes were unsheathed, it was not a battle, it was an extinction. Across the eye, word spread, not through formal channels, but in whispers, mutters in the halls of demon princes, rumors among Black Legion captains, laughter, nervous and quiet, among renegade militia leaders. Khârn walks again. No one summoned him. He could not be bribed or coerced. There was no pattern to his appearances. He might arrive at the climax of a siege, decimating both sides in a haze of blood, or at the birth of a new chaos cult, slaughtering celebrants before they even spoke his name. Sometimes he didn't even fight Astartes. On Dynaxos, he single-handedly depopulated an entire hive world after its governor failed to deliver sacrifices to Khorne. Over 13 billion souls died in less than a solar week. The screams never reached orbit. The Vox silence was all the proof the Imperium needed. Other times, Khârn joined battles already in motion, only to turn on his allies mid-conflict. On the plains of Arkan Cross, he fought alongside the Iron Warriors against the Blood Angels, until Perturabo's sons dared issue him an order. He killed their war leader in 5 strokes, then turned on everyone. The battlefield was reduced to a charnel pit. Loyalist, traitor, civilian, servitor. None were spared. In orbit, Mechanicus observers recorded the scene in horror, watching as one figure, bareheaded, his armor crimson with old and new blood, walked in slow circles around the wreckage, not speaking, not roaring, just walking, counting the bodies. No one knew how many fell that day. No one would ever know. Khârn never lingered. He never built monuments, never looked back. But some did. There were those who followed him. Not as a war band, not as a legion, as pilgrims. They called themselves the Path of Brass, berzerkers, murderers, failed champions, broken sons of chaos who had lost all identity, all hope. Drawn to Khârn like flies to a corpse, they shadowed him across battlefields, waiting for his rage to spill onto them. They never asked questions, never demanded purpose. They simply followed. Some hoped he would speak to them, others wanted to die by his hand, believing it a holy death. Khârn gave them nothing. He did not recognize them. They were not part of his oath. And when the blood ran cold after a battle, he often turned and butchered them with the same mechanical efficiency he gave to everyone else. Not out of hatred, but because they had dared expect something from him. And Khârn owed nothing to anyone anymore, only to the war, to the oath spoken with no audience. I swear to the war eternal. The galaxy did not yet know it, but it had birthed its final truth. A being beyond ideology, beyond allegiance, beyond even chaos itself. A man whose god did not demand worship, only skulls. And in that truth, Khârn found something resembling peace. Not happiness, not clarity, but a purpose that would never abandon him. And in the centuries to come, when demon princes faded, when the names of primarchs were lost to time and rot, when even the eye of terror flickered and shifted, Khârn would still be there, breathing, bleeding, killing, because war was the only thing that would never lie to him. There was a moment, brief, sharp, and seared into the minds of all who survived, when the howls stopped. Not because the killing ended, because the Legion ended. Scalathrax, A world few had heard of before it was torn open by fire and madness, a frozen, wind-blasted planet of ice-rimed rock and ancient manufactura half buried beneath centuries of glacial advance. It had no tactical value, no secrets, no prophecy, just cold, storms, and steel. But it would become the place where the World Eaters died. Not in flesh, in purpose. They had come to Scalathrax chasing the Emperor's children. The warband of Lucius the Eternal had laid claim to the ruins of the forged city Urspex, seeking arcane weapons and degenerate trophies. Angron, half demented with fury, had demanded their destruction. The World Eaters answered his call not out of duty, but out of habit. They wanted blood, and the Third Legion were only too eager to provide it. Khârn didn't speak when they landed. He had not spoken in months. He had already been reforged in the crucible of Khorne's favor, something other than mortal, yet not demon. He walked at the vanguard of the assault force, a solitary figure in a crimson tide. The frost-cracked ferrocrete shattered beneath his boots. Gorechild purred in his grip like a beast straining for the leash. They hit the city at dusk. The fighting was immediate, intimate. World Eater and Noise Marine met in alleyways, their howls drowned beneath the shrieking of sonic cannons and chain blades. The streets filled with twitching bodies, bodies missing limbs, bodies that screamed with mouths that no longer had faces. Slaaneshi decadence against Khornat fury. Khârn didn't see enemies. He saw prey. He tore through Lucius's warriors like rot through wood. Their elegance meant nothing. Their war songs, their gyrating blade dances, their ecstatic pain, none of it mattered. When Gorechild found them, they died just like anyone else, screaming. But the enemy wasn't the threat. The World Eaters were. As the battle deepened and the ice winds howled harder, cohesion crumbled. Squad leaders were ignored. Vox relays drowned in laughter and incoherent rage. Whole companies turned inward, settling old grudges in the middle of the siege. Rivals killed one another mid-charge. Apothecaries split open wounded brothers to harvest gene seed they'd never use. The nails had long since overridden loyalty. But here, for the first time, they overrode reality. Khârn had seen this before, on the Conqueror, after the heresy. But then it had been brief, a moment of madness. Here it was deliberate. Scalathrax whispered to them. Its chill didn't just freeze the blood, it calcified their fury, turned it inwards. The wind carried no sound but that of clashing steel and butchered oaths. No retreat was ordered, no strategy employed. There was only fighting. And then, the fire began. It was a simple act. A warband commander, name forgotten, face lost, ordered a flamer barrage to clear a choke point held by the Emperor's children. But the chemicals caught the wind, carried further than expected. They hit a promethium silo. It detonated with a sound like a god choking. The flames rolled over the ruins like a living tide. The frozen city ignited. At first, the World Eaters howled in glee. Fire was another kind of slaughter. But the blaze didn't stop. It surged through hab complexes, ancient forge vents, and reactor cores. The storm above churned with heat and static. Ash replaced snow. And still, the killing didn't stop. Khârn stood in the middle of it all, blood running down his chest, surrounded by a ring of corpses, both 3rd and 12th Legion. The smoke was thick. His vox was silent. His ears bled from the concussive shriek of collapsing towers. He turned and saw them. World Eaters, dozens, hundreds, brawling in the square behind him. Not fighting Emperor's children, each other. And not for survival, for pleasure. He moved toward them. One called his name. Khârn, brother, they're ours now. No more targets but us. He said it like a joke. Khârn didn't laugh. He stepped forward, raised Gorechild, and killed him. The others didn't stop, so he killed them too, one by one. then in pairs, then in groups. At first it was to stop them, to end the madness. But the nails loved it. The pain disappeared. The tremor in his hands vanished. His mind focused. Khârn gave in. Not to rage, to clarity. He was not here to lead. He was not here to save. He was here to finish what the Legion had become. They followed the nails. They had no father. Angron had long since vanished into the warp, a howling storm of demonic fury that had ceased to care for anything but carnage. There were no captains, no command chains, only him. He would end the Legion. He made his way across the battlefield, hunting his own kind, but not out of hatred, out of necessity. He found world eaters huddled for warmth in a collapsing manufactory, cut them down without hesitation. He found officers still trying to coordinate a retreat, beheaded. He found his former sergeant, Khârn the Voicebreaker, hiding beneath the ruined chapel of the Omnissiah. Khârn asked him nothing. He simply struck. The killing lasted all night. By morning, nothing remained of the World Eater's Legion except corpses and whispers. Khârn stood at the center of the ash field, the city behind him a charred skeleton. Around him, the snow returned, tainted black, falling slowly through the smoke. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel anything. The nails were quiet. Too quiet. And that's when he knew. It was over. The Legion was dead. Not in title. They would still call themselves World Eaters, still paint their armor in blood, still carve Khorne's symbol into their skulls. But the Legion, the Brotherhood that had once stood beside Angron on Armatura at Eastvon before Terra, it was gone, and Khârn had killed it. Skalathrax wasn't a victory, it was a wake. From that day on, Khârn fought alone, truly alone. No company, no command, no warband dared claim him. Those who tried, died. He was a red shadow in the flames, a memory of something that never should have lived. They would call him Betrayer, though few remembered why. They would call him Khorne's Chosen, though he never once called himself that. He was just Khârn, the man who had ended his own Legion. Because someone had to. There was no dawn on the night the Betrayer turned his blade inward, no rising sun to mark the shift, no heralds to speak of treachery, only blood, only silence. And then fire. Khârn had always been a weapon, tempered in fury, quenched in purpose. He had been forged by Angron, wielded by Khorne, and feared by all. But as centuries ground to dust in the endless churn of the Long War, the echoes of the great betrayal faded. The Horus heresy was no longer spoken of in fear or reverence. It had become history, myth, rusted chainmail worn over rotted bone. Yet Khârn remained. He endured where others ascended or fell. The demon princes, bloated with warp power and encircled by sycophants, raised palaces of madness and temples of ego. The warlords of the Black Legion plotted, the Night Lords hunted, the Iron Warriors built, the Word-bearers preached. But Khârn, he killed. That was all. No ambition, no legacy, no throne to sit upon. And so he became something else, a reminder. The World Eaters, if they could still be called that, had splintered after Skalathrax, scattered like bone shrapnel from a skull caved in by its own hand. The Legion's remnants roamed the Eye of Terror, blood-drunk and faith-mad, each warband screaming louder than the last for the blood god's attention. Some fashioned themselves as prophets, others as avatars. They offered planets in sacrifice, demonic hosts, rivers of blood. And they were rewarded. Sometimes, but the most famous among them, the most feared, was the one who asked for nothing. Khârn didn't pray, he didn't kneel, he didn't command, he simply appeared. And where he walked, others bled. It should have been enough. But the Eye of Terror has no concept of enough. And gods, especially those made of violence, are never satisfied. On the demon world of Gorsh 9, the Red Sanctum rose from a plain of bone. It was a tower of brass and bleeding stone, built in Khârn's honor, not by him but by others, a warband known as the Skull Vow. Once loyal to the captain of the 8th Assault Company, they had spent decades collecting his relics, scraps of armor, broken teeth, torn bolts of scripture half scrawled in his blood. They preached the creed of the eternal berserk, that Khârn was not merely Khorne's instrument, but his equal in fury, blasphemy to some, a truth to others. When Khârn arrived, he did not speak. He climbed the steps of the sanctum while his name was screamed by 1,000 frenzied voices. Blood was flung like holy water. Champions knelt. The air shook with drums made from rib cages and flayed skin. At the top, they awaited him, 8 chosen, each bearing a gift. A sword of warp-forged adamantium, a horned helm plated in soul steel, a tome of oaths written in the blood of dead primarchs, a leashed demon, once a custodian, and more, all offered freely, all in his name. He looked at the offerings and began to kill. The first head rolled before the screams stopped, the second before anyone moved. By the time his axe was a blur of red and teeth, the skull steps were slick with blood. His own followers, if they could be called that, fell like wheat to the scythe. He did not roar, he did not curse, he simply betrayed. The sanctum burned behind him, and from its ruins rose only silence. That night, word spread like rot across the eye. Khârn had turned against his own, not just in violence, but in principle. He no longer acknowledged hierarchy of any kind, not of mortals, not of demons, not even of gods. The Skull Vow had dared to speak for him, and so they died. But they would not be the last. At the blood confluence of Varanak, 3 warbands met to consecrate an alliance. They brought entire prison populations in chains, millions of captives, men, women, and children, to be offered to Khorne in rites older than history. It was to be a ceremony unlike any before. Khornate champions gathered from across the stars. They chanted, they slaughtered, they filled the sky with flame and laughter. And then, again, Khorne appeared. He did not land in a gunship. He did not stride through war banners or processions. He walked alone, dusty, blood-cloaked, breath steaming in the cold air. He moved through the crowds, unseen until it was too late. When he reached the altar where a brass throne had been erected in his name, he did not climb it. He destroyed it. The crowd's shock became fear, then rage. A black berzerker warlord, massive and horned, shouted at him across the square. "You blaspheme! You defy your own creed!" Khârn turned. The warlord raised his axe. Khârn threw Gore-Child. The spinning chain axe screamed through the air and punched into the warlord's face with a screech of bone and metal. It kept going, dragging the body with it, until the skull and spine came loose in a spray of ichor. No one else moved. Khârn retrieved the axe, then spoke. His voice was low, quiet, but every man heard it. "There are no thrones for those who do not kneel." That was all. Then he left. The betrayal became legend. World Eaters began killing one another in fear and confusion. Those who styled themselves as leaders were hunted by their own men, lest Khârn appear in the night. The cult of the Bloody Path fractured. The Reapers of the 8th Skull tore down their own monuments. Worship of Khârn became taboo. He was not a god. He was the end of gods. The whispers changed. He wasn't called champion anymore. He was the Oathbreaker, the last blade. Some even whispered he was no longer mortal, that the blood god had tried to turn him into a demon prince, and Khârn had refused. No proof exists, but if you ask the survivors of that time, those who heard his voice, who watched him stand over burning effigies, who bled and prayed and were still struck down, They will all say the same thing. Khârn had turned not against his enemies, but against the idea of allegiance, and in doing so had betrayed the very thing every warrior in the Eye clung to, meaning, what good was loyalty if Khârn rejected it? What good was devotion if even he denied it? What use were gods if their greatest servant needed no reward? The night of betrayal never ended, because it was not a battle. It was a realization that Khârn did not serve. He was. It is a strange thing to witness the death of a legacy not in fire or blood, but in silence. No oaths were broken, because there were no oaths left. No banners fell, because they had long since been soaked in gore and forgotten. But when the last warband of the 12th Legion tried to call itself a legion, Khârn was there to end the lie. It began on the warp-scoured world of Deshia's Echo, a hollowed husk of a planet, scarred and barren, named for the world where Angron was first found. A bitter mockery, perhaps, or a cruel monument built by fanatics who did not understand the man they claimed to follow. Deshia's Echo had no breathable air. Its sky was choked with ash storms. Its soil was flecked with iron and glass, and the few remaining structures were carved in the shape of skulls stacked atop screaming faces. Here, a conclave of world-eaters gathered, though that name had long since rotted. They were not a legion. They were pretenders. 9 warbands, each ruled by a self-proclaimed exalted, had converged. They came in towering black ships and crimson dreadclads, descending in thunderous procession. Each leader had proclaimed themselves heir to Angron, voice of the Red Angel, the next Gore Father. Each one had dreams of uniting the fragments, of restoring the Legion's strength, of leading them into a new age of conquest in Khorne's name. They called it the Red Convergence. Khârn called it a mistake. He was not invited. He did not arrive by fleet or ritual. He did not bring banners or followers. He came on foot, across the ash plains under a lightning-streaked sky, his footsteps shaking dust from statues that had not been touched in 1,000 years. His armor was scarred and bare, his weapons, gory child, chipped and scorched, a bolt pistol of unknown make, and a chain blade of archaic origin slung across his back, were caked with so much dried blood they gleamed rust-red even in the black wind. The first sentries who saw him approached with reverence. They did not live long enough to ask questions. Khârn's presence should have sparked celebration. These warbands worshipped him. Some wore replicas of his helm. Others daubed their armor in phrases attributed to him, most of them false. His silence had become doctrine, his carnage, scripture. But when they saw him walk into the center of their circle, silent, expressionless, blood drying on his gauntlets, they understood the truth. He had not come to be led. He had come to kill. The 9 exalted stood atop a dais of chained skulls, arguing over who would command whom. Their voices were raised, their champions nearby, armed and posturing. No one noticed Khârn at first, no one except the Helit scribe whose job it was to inscribe every word of the meeting in blood upon a parchment made from flayed skin. He dropped his quill when he saw the betrayer approaching. Khârn said nothing. He stepped onto the dais. The closest, exalted, a bloated warlord named Bakhor Kul, sneered and raised a hand. "You dare interrupt?" Gorechild spoke for him. One sweep, one wet, screaming arc. The warlord's upper torso landed in the circle below with a sound like meat hitting stone. Chaos erupted, but Khârn was already moving. Another exalted, Zadrak the Tongueless, called Voice of Silence, lunged with a serrated glaive. He died second. His glaive snapped in half against Khârn's vambrace. His helm shattered under an elbow. His throat opened beneath Gorechild's teeth. The others scattered, drawing blades and bolters, screaming orders, summoning demons. Khorne tore through them as if they were made of parchment. He didn't speak. He didn't roar. He cleansed. The champions who rushed to their lord's defense died in droves. They came in formations. They came in frenzies. They came with blessed weapons and cursed names and demonic runes burning in their eyes. It didn't matter. Khorne wasn't there for them. He was there for the lie. He was there because they had spoken the word legion with unworthy mouths, because they dared to rebuild what they had willingly torn apart. Angron had left them. The heresy had ended. The butcher's nails had rotted their minds into dogma. There was nothing left to unify. Khorne was the last truth of the World Eaters, and he had come to make that truth final. The last of the exalted, Lord Diranak, the Gore Prince, tried to flee. He activated a teleportation beacon, bound to a void ship in orbit. A blast of blood-red light enveloped him. He never left the surface. Khorne caught him mid-phase. Gorechild bisected him before the warp could take him. The energy backlash tore a crater into the ground and flung burning corpses in every direction. Khorne stood in the ashes. The wind howled, and for the first time in 1,000 years, there was no one left to challenge him. No false prophets, no splinter lords, no war council, just silence. And Khorne. He stood in the center of Deshia's echo, atop the remains of a mockery of his father's name, and looked to the blood-dark sky. Thunder rolled, the eye of terror pulsed above. He could feel it, Khorne's gaze, distant and watchful, waiting, judging. Khorne said nothing, but he thought, and the thought was this: "You gave me rage. I gave you a legion. You took that legion and made it a rabble. Now I give it back, in pieces." He turned from the ruin, alone once more. The warbands did not pursue. The survivors scattered, those too broken or too afraid to fight. They fled to the corners of the eye, whispering stories that would become legend. The sundering of Angron's sons. The night Khorne killed the last chance of unity. The night the World Eaters truly died. And Khorne, once their shield, once their voice, once their spear, walked into darkness, bearing only one thing: the knowledge that nothing, not loyalty nor brotherhood, not purpose nor past, could survive what he had become. He was not a leader, not anymore. He was not the betrayer, he was the end. The warp is not a place, it is not a dimension, or a field of energy, or a metaphysical current as the Mechanicus once claimed. It is not even a mirror of reality. It is a lie, one so vast and loud that it becomes a truth for those who hear it too long. And within that lie something walked, something real. Khorne. He passed through the Eye of Terror not like a traveler, not even like a soldier, but like a wound that refused to heal. He did not seek anything, and yet he was always found. Where the warp howled loudest, where demon tides clashed with mortal desperation, where the broken fragments of dead legions still tried to scratch meaning into ash, there he was. A figure, alone. A shadow with a voice that never spoke, and an axe that never stopped. The eye should have consumed him. Others, far stronger, far wiser, had been undone by it. Guilliman had nearly perished within its madness. Mortarion had become something other in its grip. Thousands of champions, warlocks, and demon princes had risen and fallen within its grasp. But Khorne endured. He walked without destination, no path, no plan. His armor rusted, pitted with decades of gore. The nails in his skull had long since fused with his thoughts. He no longer felt pain. He no longer dreamed. He simply moved. And wherever he went, the warp shivered. The eye hated him. Because Khorne did not belong there. He was not a creature of corruption. He was something before corruption. He was what the warp imitated but could never become. Pure violence. On the demon world of Irazal, Khorne wandered into the court of the sibilant queen. a warp beast crowned in gold-veined bone, surrounded by 600 courtiers made of whispers and silk skin. Her palace was alive, grown from the fused memories of 7 dying civilizations. She invited him to kneel. She promised him gifts, demonhood, godflesh, the secrets of time, and the scream of a dying sun. Khârn answered by decapitating her. He did not speak during the slaughter. He did not look upon her courtiers. He simply walked through the palace, killing whatever existed. By the end, the throne was a ruin, and the whispers were silent. Word spread. Khârn had rejected demonhood. Again, on Malvoid Prime, he faced a cult of Khornity scholars, monks who believed they could decipher Khorne's true name, his first syllable, the sound that split existence when rage was born. They believed Khârn to be the key, the cipher. They welcomed him with fanfare and sacrifice. They read from scrolls in tongues no human should speak. They bled themselves in his name. He burned their temple to the ground. They did not resist. They died believing it was part of the ritual. And still he moved on. In the depths of the warp, he encountered entities too great for form, gods in making, war echoes given shape. One, a colossal demon engine forged of emotion and molten brass, demanded his name. Khârn gave it Gorechild instead. Its death scream echoed through 6 dimensions. Afterward, Khârn sat among the ruin. The nails had grown quiet, not silent, not gone, but contemplative. That terrified the warp more than anything, because even the nails, once mindless instruments of control and madness, now obeyed him. He had become the master of the thing that broke empires, and in doing so became untouchable. Chaos cannot claim what it cannot change. The eye grew restless. Warbands gave him wide berth. In the Shriek Vale, a gathering of 8 demon princes called for his death. They sent an army of war beasts, possessed engines, and bound warp knights to encircle him. They prepared traps, glyphs, oaths, things that had brought low greater beings. He walked through it all. 2 days later, the 8th thrones of the demon princes were empty. Only one sound remained, the dragging of a chain axe through a sea of black blood. The eye did not speak of him after that. It whispered. And then Khârn vanished. No one saw where he went. His name passed into silence for years, decades, maybe centuries. And then, at the edge of real space, he returned, not with a fleet, not with a call, just appeared as he always did on a world called Vrakhol, an imperial mining colony on the fringes of Segmentum Obscurus. The people there had no knowledge of demons, no faith, just rock, fire, and quotas. The first massacre was quick. A governor's son, executed by Khârn in the center of the city square. The garrison responded with tanks and gunships. By the end of the day, there were no walls left. By the end of the week, there were no people. Khârn left a single message scrawled in blood across the scorched remains of the governor's palace. The eye is a cage. That was all. He moved again. Now he walks both in and out of the warp. The barrier no longer matters. He can be seen leading berserkers on the bridge of a Black Legion cruiser one day, then cutting them down the next. He appears in the ranks of demonic hosts and then slaughters them from within before the battle is over. He walks into cults, praised as a saint, then burns their temples down with the corpses of their own priests. Because Khârn is not a servant, not anymore. He is a consequence. Where there is war, he arrives. Where there is silence, he brings screams. He is neither mortal nor demon. He is the presence of war itself, and he is never done. Across the Eye of Terror, warbands now use his name not as a rallying cry, but as a warning. They whisper it when their champions grow too proud, when their sorcerers claim they've mapped the tides of the warp, when their leaders think themselves gods. They say it like a curse. Khârn walks. and when he does, the eye trembles, because it cannot hold him, because it never could. There were no screams, not at first, just the quiet rattle of chains swaying in the dust-filled air, the distant creak of metal under pressure, and the slow, steady beat of a drum with no drummer, a rhythm that throbbed behind the eyes of every soul who still dared to draw breath on the orbital forge known as Skarvald's Crown. The World Eaters had once called this place a refuge, a floating arsenal carved into the remains of a dead Mechanicum stronghold, orbiting a shattered world that no longer had a name. It had no purpose but to build weapons, bolters, chain axes, war engines, each one engraved with the icon of Khorne, and shipped to whichever warband offered the most skulls in return. But on this day it built nothing. Because Khârn had come, he did not arrive by Stormbird or Teleportarium. There was no warp rend, no thunderclap. One moment the forge was silent. The next, the sensorium picked up a solitary life form in the eastern quarter, moving against the artificial gravity, heat levels spiking in a corridor where no one had passed for weeks. Tech thralls shuddered. Astartes patrols scrambled to respond. The first squad that found him didn't even have time to scream. They had expected a berzerker. What they found was something else. Khârn did not run. He did not howl. He walked, Gorechild in his hand, and with every step another trail of red was carved into the deck plates. The nails were singing again, and he was smiling, the butcher's grin. It wasn't madness, it wasn't joy, it was something older, something elemental. It was the grin of a man who had finally accepted that his only truth was this endless cycle, this perfect purpose. The Forge Keep, a monstrous warlord named Khârn the Bound, sealed the central citadel, activating the ancient defenses buried beneath the Forge's ancient tech layers. Automated turrets, adamantic fields, demonic wards, he brought everything online. Then he began broadcasting, over Vox, over Warp Echo, over every frequency. Khârn, you are no warlord, no god. You are a ghost, a tool long since broken. This forge is ours. This sanctuary is not yours. Khârn heard it. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He was already inside. The corridors filled with fire. Bolter rounds shrieked past him, but he kept moving. Dreadnoughts strode into his path, bellowing threats from mouths of steel and flame. He killed them in silence, not because they weren't worth the effort, but because words were lies. Only death was honest. Khârn's warriors began to panic. They weren't afraid of Khârn's strength, though it was immeasurable. They weren't afraid of his speed, though none who fought him survived long enough to see it. They were afraid of something else. His smile never faltered. That terrible, quiet grin. A grimace cut into his face like a scar. A mask of understanding, not lunacy. He knew what he was doing, and he enjoyed it. Not as a man enjoys glory, as a man enjoys breathing. When Khârn reached the inner sanctum, the walls were already slick with the blood of 3 warbands. There were corpses in power armor stacked like barricades. Fires burned unchecked. The forge's cooling systems were collapsing under the strain. Khârn was waiting. He stood upon a dais, flanked by 2 warp forge champions and a trio of demon-bound constructs chained to the floor. His armor was immense, layered with bone and skulls taken from fallen primarchs warriors. He held a chained fist longer than a man and a bolt cannon fused to his shoulder. He expected a duel, a final contest of worth. But Khârn didn't slow, didn't speak, didn't raise Gorechild like a duelist preparing for a noble clash. He charged. The first champion moved to intercept. He died before he saw the blade coming. The second swung a demon axe, its edge wreathed in shrieking flame. Khârn broke his arms at the elbows, reversed the grip on Gorechild, and crushed his helm with the back blade in a single motion. Khârn roared and loosed the constructs. The demons surged forward, flailing with whips and jaws of molten brass. Khârn leapt into them. The battle lasted seconds, but to the watching Hailut's servants, it felt like forever. They would never speak again. Not because Khârn killed them, but because what they saw broke their minds. He moved like a storm given form, precise, fluid. Every kill an offering, but not to Khorne, number to himself. When only Khârn remained, chest heaving, bolt cannon glowing, Khârn stepped forward, still smiling. "You could have led us," Khârn spat. "You could have rebuilt us, but you'd rather watch it all burn." Khârn's smile widened. He said one word, "Yes." Then he struck. The impact shook the dais. Gorechild bit deep into Khârn's chest, sparks flying. The second blow tore through his shoulder guard. The third shattered his Vox grill. Khârn fell backward, coughing blood, his chain fist twitching weakly. Khârn knelt beside him, not in pity, but in finality. "Legions die," he said quietly, his voice gravel and smoke. "Purpose doesn't." And with that he crushed the warlord's skull beneath one iron boot. The forge burned for a day and a night. When the fires finally guttered, the orbiting ships received a single Vox ping. Khârn's voice, unfiltered, clear. "The nails don't lie, you do." It was the last thing they ever heard. The forge went silent. No survivors, no remnants, only him. When Khârn left, drifting through space aboard a stolen drop pod, he left no mark, no shrine, no flag, just the grin. A memory etched into every corridor he had walked. Across the Eye of Terror, the story spread. The butcher was smiling now, and that was worse than anything, because it meant he had found peace. And for a man like Khârn, peace only meant more killing was coming. There is no ending for a man like Khârn, no redemption, no apotheosis, no final glorious stand in a blaze of martyrdom. Not even a quiet death in the shadow of something greater. Only one path remains for the last true warrior of the 12th Legion. Endless war, and he welcomes it. For most beings, mortal or otherwise, existence requires meaning. A cause, a god, a flag to carry, a name to chant. But Khârn has cast them all aside. His name lives on, not because he has built something, but because he has destroyed everything that tried to contain him. They call him the Betrayer. The name clings to him like blood on his blade. But there is a mistake in that name. Khârn has betrayed nothing. He has only ever been true to the one constant that never lied to him. Violence. The galaxy continues to burn, and still he walks it, never resting, never speaking of the past, never claiming territory or command. He doesn't campaign. He doesn't lead. He simply appears in places where the battle is fiercest, where the hate runs deepest, where both sides teeter on the brink of annihilation. And then he kills everyone. No one calls him brother anymore. Not even the most deranged of world eaters dare to. He is no longer of the Legion, not even a remnant of it. He is its ghost, its executioner, and its final truth. On the war world of Kranos Ultima, a once imperial bastion now torn apart by 3 competing chaos warbands, Khârn emerged from the mists of battle like a stormfront made flesh. There were no transmissions announcing his arrival, no warp flare, no prophecy, only silence, followed by impact. He descended through fire and orbital wreckage, not aboard a vessel, but standing atop a falling drop pod ripped open by his own hands. As the pod slammed into the ruins of a manufactorum, it exploded in a burst of scrap and red vapor, flinging metal like shrapnel into 3 advancing squads of iron warriors. They died before they knew what had struck them. Khârn rose from the smoking crater, armor streaked in black soot, the firelight casting shadows across the grinning skulls chained to his belt. Gorechild was already active, spinning in his hand with a low, growling purr. The ground around him was thick with bones. The air reeked of promethium and exposed organ flesh. Thunderhawks spiraled overhead, torn in half by warp lightning. Mortals and Astartes alike screamed from every direction. It was perfect. Khârn smiled, and then the nails screamed. He charged. For 2 hours he fought without pause. First through the lines of the Black Maw warband, berzerkers who thought themselves devoted to the same god. They offered him shouts of praise as they fired, believing his presence a blessing. He answered with dismemberment. Their champion, Gorvus Redeye, attempted to duel him atop a broken basilica dome. He lasted 5 seconds. Khârn broke his chain blade with a parry, kneed him in the gut, and took his head without a word. The warband routed, what was left of them anyway. Then came the Skull Howlers, former word-bearers turned blood cultists who had dedicated the entire planet as a shrine to the blood god. They tried to welcome him, lit incense, offered slaves, even threw their own wounded into the flames in offering. Khârn burned their temple. It wasn't about blasphemy. It was about truth. If you required worship to justify your violence, you were weak. If you had to prove devotion with ritual, then your rage wasn't real. Khârn killed their high priest by impaling him through the throat with a rebar spike, then threw his flaming corpse into the warp-forged sacrificial pit. He didn't watch it burn. He didn't need to. The third force on Khârnos Ultima, the last to challenge him, were mortals, Imperial remnants, Astra Militarum holdouts, penal battalions half-mad and wearing flak armor so old it cracked under pressure. A few Sisters of Battle remained, their power armor scorched and ammo running low. They weren't worthy, but Khârn didn't discriminate. He stormed their defense lines without hesitation, absorbing last shots and auto-cannon fire like a god of iron. His armor cracked, his skin burned, but the grin never left his face. In the chaos, one mortal, a young woman, face painted with dirt and blood, stood her ground. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She aimed a plasma gun at his chest and fired. The blast seared his side open. Khârn didn't even flinch. He closed the distance in an instant, swatting the weapon aside with his forearm. But then he paused, just for a moment. She didn't scream, didn't beg. She looked at him, eyes wide, defiant, furious, and said, "Do it, traitor." He raised Gorechild, held it, and for a moment, just a flicker in the heat haze, he saw Terra, the arena, the first day in the Legion, the last stand on Istvan. Angron's final roar, blood on the inside of his helm, the feeling of a brother's back beside him, the sound of the first nail screaming to life in his skull. The axe came down. There was no mercy, only silence. By the time Khârn left Khârnos Ultima, the planet was burning. None of the warbands remained. None of the loyalists survived. He didn't stay to gloat, didn't etch his name into the stone, didn't leave a warning. He left nothing. Because there was no message, no cause, just the slaughter. That was the message, that was the cause. In time, myths would grow from Khârnos Ultima. They would say that Khârn no longer eats, sleeps, or speaks, that the warp itself bends to avoid his footsteps, that he is immortal, unkillable, unbound by god or demon, that his smile isn't carved by madness, but by freedom, freedom from everything that ever tried to control him. Some claim he is building something, a new warband, a new legion, a throne of his own. They're wrong. Khârn builds nothing. He doesn't need to. He is not the past. He is not the future. He is now. He is the axe in motion, the scream in the smoke, the blood you didn't see until it was already on your hands. And he's coming, always, somewhere, right now, in a dark hallway on a dying ship, or at the edge of a cratered trench, or in the middle of a battlefield so loud it drowns your thoughts, there is a moment of stillness, a pause, a chill in the air, and then a sound, a growl, a whirring blade, a smile wide and red and impossible, and you realize you are not fighting a man. You are fighting war itself, and war never ends.